My name is Jim Young, and welcome to Van Hollow Pottery. It seems like just yesterday, although it's been 40 years yesterday, that I began my career in pottery. And what I remember the most is how I felt at the time when I first discovered clay. And I can say I remember it as clearly as if it were yesterday. I can remember the hiss of the sound of the clay going through the potter's fingers. I can remember even the smell of the clay. And it has a lovely earthy aroma because it is earth. Mostly I remember what it did for me. At the time I was living a sort of a bureaucratic existence, what I call a neck-up existence, working for a large corporation and trying to do the best for my young family. But something was wrong in my life. There was something missing. There was something, I call it a hunger, an itch that I could not scratch. And I had no idea what it was. I had no idea, as George Leonard said, what would be the nameless grace that I should ask for. What would be the cure? What would stop this hunger? Quite by accident, I took a pottery class and ended up going one night a week in East Aurora, New York at the Roycroft, which is acknowledged as the birthplace of the American arts and crafts movement. Once a week I would go for 3 hours and make pottery. And I fell in love. The best I can describe it, I fell ambiently in love. As a matter of fact, I think a lot about the kind of love that the poet Rumi expressed when he said, appropriately, he said, "I am a potter, a molder of form, and with these hands I can build 1,000 pots. But in this house of mud and water, my heart has fallen into ruin, has opened. My heart has fallen into ruin. Enter this house, my love," he said. "Enter this house, or let me leave." So I can honestly say there was an aspect of, what shall I call it, maybe desperation to the attraction that pottery had for me. I really wanted what it apparently had to offer to me. Many years later, and many studios later, I still make pottery. I still make mostly functional pottery, and I still enjoy it. I enjoy teaching. And I learned a couple of things about the clay. I learned a lot more about myself, and I guess when I was thinking about myself, I can honestly say that it was easy to find self-expression in clay. You touch it, it moves, and all your moves, even casual ones, will change the clay. And at first I found that to be delightful. Then I found it to be intriguing. And finally I realized that I was expressing myself in clay quite naturally and quite easily. So over the decades, the 4 decades since I began, I can honestly say that I've seen a lot of change. I see it in the pots more easily than I see it in myself. And the pots have become more sophisticated. The glazing has become better. The forms, I think, have become better. And I like to think that maybe I have become a little bit more refined myself. So 40 years in clay, and I've learned a lot about myself. But I've also learned a few things about clay. One, I know for sure that clay is a living substance. It's not inert. It definitely, though it's passive and though it's gentle, it definitely is interactive. It interacts with me on whatever level I'm willing to interact with it, as strange as that sounds. You push it and it molds to your push. You hollow it out and it responds to your fingers and your touch. But more than that, there's something that gets imparted. I'm not sure if I impart something to the clay or if the clay imparts something to me. I'm not sure if it happens on a biochemical or molecular level or what. But in the hours that I spend in the studio in a focused way, I can honestly say that I feel more whole. And incidentally, students who come here, and some have studied with me for years and years, say the same thing. They frequently say that in different modes of expression, that the hours, the 3 hours they spend here every week in their little classes are among the most meaningful hours that they spend in their entire week. So I listen to these things, and I'm pretty well convinced now that clay is, though it's universal, it seems to be all around us. It is of the earth, And I've come to think philosophically, a personal philosophy, I guess you might call it, that we have a contract with the earth, and that the clay, in my case, is a way of touching that Mother Earth and of receiving what she's willing to give me, including balance, happiness, joy, and it's been an amazing, amazing journey. Okay, thank you for listening to my rambling of my 40-year history. I hope it makes some sense to you, but I hope mostly what you're about to see will help clarify what I had to share. So let's go into the studio and check out some things. So one of the things that I like about working with clay is sheer physicality, the use of my body, and I'll just let it demonstrate itself. I'm going to take this clay, throw it on the floor, pound it a little bit, like this. Keep stretching as I throw it. Taking on sort of a shape of its own. Like a pancake. Seems like such a simple thing, the physicality, the pure physicality, but it ends up being essential to the making of pottery. So I'm now going to take this big sheet of clay and come over here and put it on my slab roller. I call this my #1 employee. Okay, this piece of equipment can roll out a sheet of clay to any thickness that you want, 20 inches wide, 4 feet long. And so I like equipment that cuts down on back work, and it's still a physical process, as you can see. So what we're doing is ironing out this sheet of clay. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, pull it on through, lift the sheets, and you can see what I have is a sheet of clay. I am now going to just take and randomly tear some of this clay. And notice I'm not being too careful. I'm actually wanting to let the clay be a bit asymmetrical. And you'll see what a difference this makes in the final piece. So I'm taking out pieces that look square or overly finished. And I want these ragged edges. So I see what I'm doing without much planning is I'm creating something which is a little bit more longitudinal. Not really a rectangle, but sort of like a rectangle. I don't put a lot of thought into this process. I sort of let the thing form itself. And there we have step 1. I'm taking this sheet of clay and dropping it onto this large hump of plaster, like a blanket, sort of. Now I'll make some more adjustments to the size. A great deal of what I'm trying to demonstrate here is the serendipitous nature of the piece and the creation of the piece. And I literally, like a cook, looking to see what the pot requires, the cooking pot. I come over here and I go, oh, okay, well, I think I'm going to add a little bit down onto this here, and a little bit around here, like so. Then I'll turn it this way, and I look for pieces with nice ragged edges, and I think I'm going to use this in this fashion over here, like so. And it's strictly an intuitive process. you look and see what comes to your mind, and in a quick, not too studied manner, try to figure out what it needs, what wants to be added. And I don't have an outcome that's necessary. It's more a question of letting the clay, so to speak, to me, and going with it. Okay, we're going to take this asymmetrical piece now, and I'm going to put it up on the potter's wheel. And up to this point, what we've been doing essentially is hand building. And I'm just going to smoothen those pieces that I added on. And every time I press, as you can see, it changes the shape a little bit more. So bear in mind, we're going to make this large piece upside down. So it needs to sit on some kind of a foot. So what I'm going to make now is the foot. There's the foot. The next step is to get this foot on top of this upside down platter, and you'll see it's still very flexible. And I'm going to bring it right over here and set it up on top like this. I'm going to get this wheel moving, not too fast. Wet it down. Okay. As you can see, the pot has dried on that hump of plaster. We have the foot applied, so it's sitting on its foot and it's slowly turning. Now comes the addition of the next serendipitous part, which is a heavy slip made of the same clay as we have here. Now watch. This is giving it more sculptural value. And for a period of time, you can change this thing quite a bit. Okay, we have fired this piece one time to about 1900 degrees, and it's now ready to have glaze applied. Notice that I use an airbrush to put on layers of glaze so that the glazes will subtly interact with each other to give the results which we're looking for. See how the texture interacts with the glaze interacts with the texture, and it all seems to come to life. Amazing process, and something that I just really treasure. Well, thank you for listening to some of my rambling and for taking part in this little studio tour of some of the methods and some of the things that represent the pottery and how it's created. I hope it made some sense to you. I hope you find it attractive. And as I used to tell my clients when I did psychotherapy, I used to ask my clients, do you have an earth practice? An earth practice? And they would look at me and say, what's that? And I would say, do you have a way of touching the earth itself? Is it gardening? Is it clay? Do you have a way of touching it? If you don't, consider picking up an earth practice as part of your own healing, as part of your own understanding and your own development. I believe that clay has provided me that path, and I'm happy to share it here today with you.